The All Blacks 2024 season has come to an end, and in this video I'll be giving my All Blacks XV, including who I feel was the best in each and every position throughout November. Now I should clarify, this is not my team of the year, that will be coming out in the near future, but jumping straight into it, the 5 matches up against Japan, Ireland, England, France, as well as the Italians, who were the best in each of the positions. In the front row, number 1, I've gone to Mighty Williams. Now, we really didn't see too much of Ethan de Groot throughout the November Internationals. Of course, that disciplinary issue, leaving him out for the majority of the games. But to Mighty Williams, in certain matches, he really did step up, which was great to see, as there was still a little bit of indecision about who would be that number 1 moving forward. But I think to Mighty Williams, if he can really sort out a few of those little things, could be exactly what the ABs need. At loose head prop number 2, Asa Fofana. Now for the overall team of the year, of course this jersey would go to Cody Taylor, but I do think Asa Fofana really stepped up throughout November. We saw Cody Taylor take that head knock early on throughout November, which then brought Asa Fofana into the starting side. I felt he had a standout game up against the English, almost enough that I would have actually probably started him up against the French as well, but they went with that experience of Cody Taylor. But Asa Fofana, he needed a couple big games to really cement himself in a lot of people's eyes as an All Black, and that's exactly what he did throughout November. Number 3, Tyrell Lomax, pretty much the only guy that they tried out in that jersey, with the exception of the game up against the Japanese. But now moving on to the locking duo. Number 4, this is where I've gone with Scott Barrett, and number 5, Tuipulotu. Now, of course, very honourable mention goes to Patrick Tuipulotu. As a super sub, there weren't many better for the All Blacks throughout November. He was able to change a couple games late, and something that the All Blacks have been looking for throughout 2024 is finding a way of bringing impact later on in a game. That last 20 minutes, where they used to be so dangerous, but lately they've been struggling to get points throughout that window. So with Patrick Tuipulotu, his experience coming off the bench, working hard in the breakdowns, and also the occasional line-out steal, he is definitely that honourable mention. I think Scott Barrett, he had some ups and downs definitely throughout 2024. That cannot be denied. But in a couple of the bigger matches throughout November, he did make a big impact. And he's one of those players I feel maybe it's still debated whether or not he should have the captaincy, but as a player in the starting lineup, I feel like he's still done enough to get himself that 4 jersey. Of course, Tuipulotu is right on his heels, trying to take that from him, but Barrett in a couple of those games, I still think he was strong enough to give him that number 4. Tuipulotu, he as well kind of had a little bit of an up and down November. He was extremely strong when it came to stealing the ball in the lineouts, had a couple shaky moments up against the French in their 1-point defeat, but Tuipulotu continuing his form from the Rugby Championship. I look forward to seeing him in 2025. But now we get into the loose forward trio, and this is where it gets interesting. Number 6, I've gone with the breakthrough player of the year, Wallace Satiti. He's had a little bit of time at 8 throughout November as well, if you do include that game up against the Japanese. He's an outstanding player, a workhorse. He will always give you that 110% out there on the park, so I had to put him at 6 for this game, even though, to Sama Penifenao's credit, he was very strong up against the Japanese at 6. Unfortunately, though, up against the French, he only went about 90 seconds before getting concussed. So that was the end of Sama Penifenao for the November Internationals. But in just that one game that we got to see of him, it did look promising. So hopefully he'll be back rearing to go for next year. In the 7 jersey, controversially, this is where I've gone Peter Lakai. Now, we did actually see Sam Cane also suffer an injury that left him out for a couple weeks, but I do feel like Peter Lakai, the fact that he had to make his way off the bench in the game up against the French, in a contest where he probably wasn't even expecting 20 minutes at the end of the game, he had to play 78, and he scored himself a try. He managed to do a lot right, and unfortunately for Sam Cane, the send-off that he got in that game up against the Italians, it just wasn't quite to the standard that a lot of people were hoping for. So that is where I've gone Peter Lakai for the November Internationals. Probably a little bit harsh, but at the end of the day, I think we have seen better tours from the veteran Sam Cane. Number 8, this is where I've gone Ardie Savea. Pretty solid all throughout November. Didn't really do a lot wrong. Had a couple big moments in important games, so I've put him there as the number 8. But moving on to the 9-10 combination, this is also where we get a bit controversial. Number 9, I've gone Cam Roigard. That makes sense, seeing as he has been a definite standout for the All Blacks in that 9 jersey. We saw a bit of Cortez Ratama, unfortunately, in a couple of those matches did crumble under the pressure, whereas Cam Roigard, I think at times maybe they took him off a little bit early, and I actually do think that was one of the things that cost the All Blacks up against the French, was not having Roigard out there for longer after the way that he did start that game. Number 10, I've gone Damian McKenzie. Now this one, it's almost like it's a reincarnation of the Richie Mo'unga versus Beauden Barrett debate. It's now become Damian McKenzie or Beauden Barrett for 10, and of course Razor still wants to be able to select Richie Mo'unga if the eligibility rules were changed, but for me anyway, McKenzie, if we look at what he did throughout the November Internationals compared to Beauden Barrett, he played at 10 up against the Japanese, partnering with Cam Roigard in a pretty successful game for the All Blacks. Now, at times he was shaky in that contest, but he also did a lot of things right and got a majority of his kicks over in the process as well. The next game that Damian McKenzie started as the 10 was up against the Irish, where he had a man-of-the-match performance, but they were his only 2 starts throughout November. For Beauden Barrett, he was the 10 in the game up against the English, when New Zealand won it by a very thin margin. He was the 10 in the game up against the French, when New Zealand suffered a loss, and he was the number 10 up against the Italians when the All Blacks had their worst game of 2024 as a whole. So of course it's very difficult to compare these two, but I will say Beauden Barrett, when he's on song, he's one of the best 10s in the world, but when he's not, it can really hurt this All Blacks backline, and I feel like we saw that a little bit by some of my other selections in this team of November, but I would still give it to McKenzie, just because when he made his way off the bench in the games that he wasn't starting, there was attacking intent there, and it at least looked like New Zealand were going forward, which was very important up against some of the top sides. I know that that decision will be debated heavily in the comments, so of course, do let me know what you think, McKenzie or Barrett, who was the better for November. Into the midfield now. This is one of those situations how we've got very limited choices because Razor made very few changes in these 2 jerseys. So I've gone number 12, Jordie Barrett, number 13, Rieko Ioane. Not exactly happy about it. I feel like Barrett was out of form since coming back from his injury. Did suffer another one in the second last game, so didn't play in the most recent game. It was Anton Lienert-Brown, who really wasn't in his best form either in that number 12 jersey. So Barrett kind of gets it out of just playing a little bit more in that 12 jersey. But honestly, in terms of the best number 12 we have seen for New Zealand, I don't think we've seen it. So it's a bit brutal, but I'm being honest. Number 13, you can almost say the same about this jersey. But the good news is, at least for Rieko Ioane, at times, there were some good moments. There are a lot of bad ones scattered throughout there as well, but Rieko Ioane as the number 13, I do think Scott Robertson has to look at those 2 jerseys next year, though, and work out what's going wrong, because maybe it is time to go back to the drawing board and find some sort of switch that can bring the All Blacks a lot more success. And that centre pairing in the back 3, number 11, I've gone Caleb Clark, number 14, Mark Talia, so the 2 Blues boys out on the wings. Clark has been busy at times, but quiet at others throughout November, but overall, still think he's the best 11 choice for the All Blacks here. Mark Talia, when he played 14, he did find success. Now, sadly, did suffer that hand injury up against the Irish, so just like a couple of these other guys, missing some minutes, but coming back for the last game up against the Italians. And then at number 15, Will Jordan, very up and down for November. In fact, I don't think there's been many All Blacks that have had a consistently strong November Internationals, with maybe the exception of the likes of Wallace Satiti. Savia overall, I'd say, was decent, and same with the Safwa Moore. In the backs, you could argue Roigard, but with the exception of those few players, it has been a very up and down kind of November for the ABs. But Will Jordan, he is my 15, who I feel did the best throughout November. Hopefully he does continue to improve, because that's the thing. Even when Jordan at times has been shaky, he's still scoring tries for the All Blacks, which is one of those rare qualities that coaches absolutely love to see in a player. Here's the player that I've gone with to close out my best All Blacks November XV. But nonetheless, do let me know, of course, who you feel was the best throughout November in each position. Now, of course, remember, this is not including the Rugby Championship. This is not including the games prior to that. We will have a Team of the Year for the All Blacks coming out a little bit later on, so be sure to check that out as well. But I do thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.